Good evening, everyone, and we welcome you to this special event to meet our incoming superintendent, Dr. Michelle Reid. My name is Marty Smith, and I serve as the Chief Operating Officer for Fairfax County Public Schools. And as we begin this evening, I would first like to thank our Annandale High School Performing Arts students for sharing their amazing talent with us tonight. I know that they're in the back somewhere, but amazing performances. We'd also like to thank Principal Sean DeRose for sharing this beautiful auditorium with us this evening. I can see him out there in the back. He's just waved in. Thank you, Mr. DeRose. And there are a few others in the house that I need to acknowledge. First, several members of our school board are in the audience, and so I'm going to ask those school board members to simply stand and be recognized. And thank you for joining us this evening. I know that some of my colleagues on the leadership team are here this evening, and I know that there are some principals in the room, so I'm going to ask my colleagues in FCPS to please stand this evening. And here lastly, as we did at the beginning, look at these great students up here on this stage. I want to thank you all for coming out. You were in class today, you've got homework no doubt tonight, and you are here to engage, and we're so glad that you're here. Lifting up a student voice is a priority for Dr. Reid, and we are eager to hear their questions. Now, I have a few housekeeping items for this evening. First, I'm going to ask that you silence your cell phones. And then in addition, to taking live questions tonight, we've received close to 300 questions through the event registration portal. We really do thank you for your engagement for this tonight's event. And some of the themes of those questions include equity, technology, learning loss, social-emotional health, and students with disabilities. Many of the questions were specific to individual situations. And in those cases, we would ask you to consider reaching out to the FCPS Family and Student Ombudsman, your Region Assistant Superintendent, and of course, your school principal. Now, we're not going to be able to get to every question tonight, but Dr. Reid will do her best to answer as many as possible. If you have a question in the room this evening, you were unable to submit it earlier, please raise your hand and a student will come around with a pen and a note card, and we'll get that question and add it to our question list today. And they're in the back raising their hands right now and waving at you. And lastly, for those asking questions tonight on these note cards, please keep in mind that we do have students in attendance. And so now I would like to introduce FCPS's incoming superintendent, Dr. Michelle Reid. Dr. Reid has been superintendent for North Shore School District in Washington State since 2016. And North Shore schools are the gold standard in the state of Washington. In 2021, Dr. Reid was named National Superintendent of the Year by the American Association of School Administrators, otherwise known as the School Superintendents Association. She was specifically recognized for her exemplary leadership, her work in closing achievement gaps, and for leading her system through the pandemic. Dr. Reid's commitment to increasing access, opportunity, and equity for all students in public education led to the creation of North Shore's Racial and Educational Justice Department. During her tenure, graduation rates have increased for all students, especially English language learners. She will be bringing that same mindset here to FCPS and will focus on ensuring that each student has the access and opportunity to reach their greatest potential. Dr. Reid is also known for leading robust community engagement so that all stakeholders, including students, have a voice. We are excited to be together tonight for the first of many such opportunities here in Fairfax County. Dr. Reid received her doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Washington, her master's in educational administration from the University of Washington, and her bachelor's degree in natural science and chemistry from the University of Puget Sound. Dr. Reid, thank you for crossing the country this evening to be with us tonight. Our parents, caregivers, and students and employees have a lot of questions for you. I know you're ready for it. So our first one we're going to start with, please tell us your why. Why did you choose education and why FCPS?
So thank you and good evening. I really appreciate you taking time on what's a glorious evening to be together in community and enable us to begin to get to know one another. So thank you for taking time this evening. I felt like this morning was Seattle weather, and I felt quite at home with the rain and the fog. So I think the evening will sunset with Fairfax County weather. When I think about answering the amazing number of questions, I want to share that this evening, as it's the first time we'll be meeting, my intent is to answer questions fairly briefly so that I can address as many questions as possible. I want to share that this evening is the first of many opportunities we'll have together to get to know one another, and to work together and partner for the benefit of each and every Fairfax County Public School Division student. So I look forward to a long relationship and embrace the fact that learning happens best in community. So to my why for public education, it is my belief that public education is the most important profession in the world because all other professions go through public education. Regardless of the career choice that you make as a young person, you have to go through K-12 education for the rudimentary learning that prepares us for the trajectory of the rest of our lives. And I was interviewed a number of years ago and asked about what's so critically important about the work we do. And it's my core value that the work we do with students for the 13, 14, 15 years they're with us is not just about the time they are with us, but it's about the trajectory of the rest of their lives that we set them on. The opportunities, the doors that are open or not as a result of our work is the importance of our work. The impact of our work is felt for generations. And I think that's the most important work we have. And together, working together, we can move mountains for each of our Fairfax County Public School students. So that's my why in a nutshell. Be happy to expand on that in coming weeks and months. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer. And we've got, again, 300 questions to delve into tonight. We have students who are going to ask questions. We've got questions in the room. So the first question, you've been with us just a few days on a couple of visits, but what is your 100-day plan for Fairfax County Public Schools?
So a 100-day plan traditionally is how do I think I'm going to spend the first 100 days within the division. And those start, by the way, July 1. So I'm still crafting, I'm still crafting the 100-day plan, and some of it's influenced by the questions I received this evening, the conversations I've had with our elected board members, the conversations I had with our students today. Christian, it's good to see you. Christopher, and there were a lot of students, met with over 100, I think, earlier today, and there are a lot of questions that came up and patterns, ideas, concerns, worries, wonders, hopes, dreams that all need to be, I think, filtered into my 100-day plan. So essentially, what I want to do is make sure that in those first times that I'm very clear about hearing as many voices as it is possible to hear and perspectives to clearly understand where Fairfax County has been, where we are, and where we together want to go. So more to come on the 100-day plan, and I will have an opportunity as well to look at data and plans, your ESSER plans and school plans and district strategic plans and goals and measurements, have an opportunity to do that deep dive in those first 100 days so that after that I'll be sharing with the community what I learned in those 100 days and sort of the direction I think might be best for us to move in. So really looking forward to those first 100 days, which start July 1. So I don't want to be, so yeah.
Our next question, many families, students, and employees would like to know your plans for addressing pandemic-related learning loss.
Yeah. It's a really important question, and I think there are several perspectives I have on that. In our school system, we're looking at how we use time differently. We bridged classes last summer prior to the school year starting, and we'll use summertime as well. And it's interesting, it's students at in every academic course that really need some bridging at this time. We actually found some of the highest interest was in our students going into pre-calculus that really just felt they didn't get everything they needed in their algebra trig the year before, or our students in AP chemistry, for example, that were concerned they missed something the year before. So we want to make sure there's not a solution for learning loss that meets every student's needs, because each student had a unique experience through the last several years. So the degree to which we can personalize our response to the learning loss that an individual student has had is going to be very important. We know that some students were impacted more than others, and it's going to be important as we look at the next round of allocating our ESSER dollars, that we make sure that our needs-based resource allocation, that those students who have been had the hardest time in the pandemic receive the most resources moving forward. So I think it's going to be important to think about how we use our resources, our time, our attention and staffing support, and also addressing, honestly, the mental health issues around the trauma many students and families experienced in the last couple of years. I don't think we can walk by that and not regard that as significant. So we have many plans, the ESSER dollar resources that I know Fairfax has already created plans for. One of the first looks will be, how have those plans worked this past year? What is it that we felt had a big impact to carry forward, and what maybe didn't, so that we might adjust moving forward to next year? And it's also a topic I'm looking forward to our students weighing in on. What I know today to be true is we also have to be careful about how we work on this learning loss catch-up. Because one of the things I've noticed is that we are actually in some cases assigning far more work today than we did before the pandemic even in some courses. And so I think we want to be very careful that what we learn, we're able to learn deeply. And for students that are the furthest behind, we provide the most time in those core math, reading, and writing areas for them to be able to accelerate their learning. And then there are other students that need to go more deeply into content in some of our project-based zones as well. So there's not a one solution fits all, but there are many solutions we're going to have to work at because each student has different needs. More to come on learning loss. It's something that's got my full attention, and obviously is a high interest issue for you that have attended. So that's our fundamental mission, is educating our young people. So we will be about that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this next question, I've heard you use these phrases before, so please help us understand the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcomes.
Right. So one of the things we found in our work is we talk about equitable opportunities, which means that there are opportunities for each and every student to access programs, courses, activities, etc. But that's not enough. If we just have equitable opportunities for everyone to access programs, courses, academic plans, activities, and so forth, and we don't expect outcomes to result in each and every student when they leave the division having the confidence and the capacity to make any choice they want about their future, then we have not met the standard. It is not sufficient to simply have equitable opportunities. It's not about just recruiting students to certain classes or supporting access to certain classes. We have to ensure success once they're in those classes. And that requires a different level of focus and a different level of attention. So when I talk about equitable opportunities, that means everyone has an opportunity to access programs. When I talk about equal outcomes, that means everybody, when they depart the division, has an equal opportunity to make the most of their dreams, their hopes, and their passions when they leave us. It doesn't mean they have the same experience, but it means when they leave, they have an opportunity to do and be whatever it is they seek to do and be based on an equitable opportunity that they've had. And I think that's absolutely critical.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to shift to our students. So Ariana from Hughes Middle School is our first student questioner. So Ariana, we're going to get the mic for you and you can ask your question.
Ariana? it on? Okay. First of all, I would like to congratulate all teachers and staff of FCPS with Teachers Appreciation Week. Yes. Dr. Reid, from what I observed, STEM subjects are rapidly gaining popularity. And occasionally other subjects like arts and humanities are left behind. So do you think that it is important to balance our education and make sure that all subjects are getting the attention, equal attention? Yes.
So that's a great question. It came up with our students. I think that there are so many ways and so many gifts that our young people bring and demonstrate and share. I think that our fine and performing arts programs, our career and technical education programs, athletics and activities, the leadership programs are critical as part of the development of our young people. The academic core, of course, must be mastered, but other courses are key to the healthy development of our young people, no question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ariana.
So, next question. What steps can we as a school system, parents, students, teachers, administrators, central office, and school board take to support excellence in our schools?
So Fairfax County Public Schools has a reputation for excellence. It's one of the finest school divisions in the country. It's one of the things that drew me to apply. The reputation is amazing. And what I would say is that Fairfax County Public Schools understands what excellence looks like in an education. Fairfax County Public Schools has been delivering a world-class education for many years. I've benchmarked the district for many years. Our next step in the journey is to make sure that each and every student has that excellent education. And we need to make sure that each and every student has access to what we already know how to do. We don't need to spend more time designing, processing, exploring what an excellent world-class education looks like. We know what that looks like in Fairfax County. Now our challenge is to make sure that each and every student experiences that, and that will be my focus in the coming year.
Next question. What is your plan to manage this very large school system effectively?
So I think one of the elephants in the room, perhaps, is that I come from a much smaller school district in the state of Washington. And that is true. In fact, it is. What I will say is that the student questions and concerns that I meet with our students in North Shore were the same questions and concerns I met with here in Fairfax County. Students across this country have similar questions, concerns, worries, hopes, dreams, obstacles, barriers, and wishes for their future. And I will stay relentlessly student-centered. I feel in some ways my leadership is about being justice-centered and future-focused. You'll hear that a lot. Justice-centered and future-focused. And one of the great things about Fairfax County is when you come to a larger division, there are more people to help, right? And many hands make light work. I will say that, as Marty introduced this evening, the individuals I've met here since I've been here are amazing. Their care is exceptional. Their commitment and passion is unbelievable. It's inspiring to me. The clear direction from our board and the community is one that will be unwavering. And so I think that it's just critical as we think about that, just the positive possibilities that we can achieve when we work together.
Okay, thank you. And I promise I won't ask you this many questions when you
quickly?
come to work.
Yeah, all right, perfect.
So this next question is, what is your vision regarding hiring and administrative staff and teachers that reflect the multicultural student and family community that makes up FCPS?
So I think it's every school division in the country is working to make sure that our workforce is diverse, that is representative of our students, and also is one that values the contributions of each and every staff member. First and foremost, we want to always hire the best and brightest staff for each position in this system. And we want to make sure there are no barriers to that employment, that application process, the interview process, and make sure that we are both recruiting and retaining our staff in the coming years. So this is definitely a priority, I know, in Fairfax County, and one that I will continue with moving forward.
Okay, we have a student question. Philip from McLean High School has a question.
Thank you.
Oh, it's Philip.
So in a recent,
I got the name wrong earlier.
yeah,
Sorry,
no, it's
Philip.
fine. In a recent interview, you have said that you've emphasized that you work for the students. Your selection process as superintendent has been quite controversial. A lot of students and their families have felt like their voices weren't heard in the process of the selection. So in your first months as superintendent, how do you intend to prove that you're on the side of the students and their families, on the side of the community? And in addition to just listening to the ideas of the community, how do you plan on implementing them and implementing policies based on the concerns that community members have?
So, Philip, I think that is obviously a question that's out there, right? So I think that it's very important to think about listening and not appropriating student voice or family voice, to understand deeply what it is that is the ask. And as we work through the conversation, one of the reasons I'm here this evening and will continue to be is I want to make sure that I stay connected to community voices, student voices, not just in the first month, but as an ongoing pattern of leadership. It's important to stay student and community centered if we're going to do this work. Philip, I would say that I hope we move beyond sides, right? That we come together, because I believe there's more that unites us than divides us. And from my chair, I am here as your superintendent. I am here to serve you. That is my role, and to serve you, our students. And in doing so, I want to make sure that I'm held accountable for the outcomes that we discuss and we agree collectively will become our North Star. We need to be convicted enough about this work that we won't let anything stop us. And I believe that together, anything is possible. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to learn more about the question, concerns, hopes, and dreams, and how I might best support you in those. So that would be my answer to that, Philip.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Philip. Another question from earlier today. How do you plan on meeting the needs of a student population that is very diverse and ensuring that FCPS continues to be among the best public education systems in the United States?
So this is an amazing student population, and I think our diversity is our strength. Diverse perspectives, ideas, experiences strengthen the work we are able to do together. And I'm looking forward to serving a district division that is a diverse and strong division, and really looking forward to the opportunities of new ideas as we move forward. I think the definition of excellence is not unlike other words we use, sometimes casually. And I think as we get closer and closer to defining what we believe is excellent as a community, then together we can move forward with initiatives that are strategic, monitor and adjust our progress, and maintain and build on that world-class reputation that we have already.
Okay. So Mackenzie from Westfield High School has the next question.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie, Dr. Reid. Thank you for having me. My question is around student feedback for actual change. What experiences or plans do you have to leverage student feedback on the effectiveness of school that goes beyond staff and parents' perspective and deeper than student focus groups and surveys, particularly when it comes to understanding the experiences of marginalized students such as people of color and the LGBTQ community?
So, These are great questions. I think they are the questions we're all wrestling with right across the country. And I just think that the student feedback is critical. In my experience, I actually have a student board that is representative of all our high school programs. I meet with students as I visit each school, and we meet with students on a regular basis, both annually and in the moment, monthly, with our student board. Currently, our student board is planning a student summit, which is happening in 2 weeks, where they invite representatives from all of our high schools. It's student-led around topics of interest for them specifically, and they problem solve what we call next steps or paths of action. And then I take that back to our elected adult board. And in the past several years, we've actually moved to create significant changes in different program accommodations for students. So this year, the main topic is around mental health and supports for mental health, as well as more parity in recognition. There's a feeling among our students that some students are celebrated and recognized perhaps more than others, and perhaps we can do that in a different way. And in particular, that's coming from our visual arts academic groups and activity groups. So we're going to meet in 2 weeks to discuss the mental health conversation and how we can work harder to destigmatize conversations around mental health, as well as student recognition. Those are our two major topics, and whatever students bring. So that feedback will be taken. I come in for the final report, and it's the feedback then as we build that into our plan for next year, which is why we do it in the spring, so that principals are aware that this is a concern and this is our action. And then the following spring at the next student summit, we evaluate the effectiveness of that as we meet to attack new goals. We have found over the years, rather than having 10 topics, if we can pick 2 or 3 and make some progress on those, that our students have felt that's a better strategy for us. But that's the type of feedback loop that is important.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks so much, Mackenzie. Let's give Mackenzie a round. So this next question, how will you ensure the civil and human rights of all students and staff are upheld and defended?
Well, my understanding would be that those are statutory rights, and therefore we have staff, both legal and administrative, that follow those, and it's my responsibility and accountability to make sure those are followed. I'm trying to take some shorter answers. I mean, we've got a lot of questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And now Taylor from London Town has the next question.
Hola, mi nombre es Taylor y vengo de London Town Elementary School. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo piensa usted hacer que las familias inmigrantes se sientan seguras en la escuela? Hi, my name is Taylor and I'm from London Town. My question is, how do you plan to make immigrant families feel safe in school?
Thank you for that question, Taylor. I think that that is such an important question, to think about our immigrant families feeling safe. And I had the opportunity to watch the board meeting, the most recent board meeting, and was so appreciative of our board passing the trust policy, which is a new policy. And I think it's aptly named, right? People have to trust that when they fill out documents that allow access and services, that information will not be turned over to ICE or any other regulatory organization that may have our immigrant families feeling unsafe. It's very important that we build bridges of trust with our immigrant families, and I believe the trust policy that was passed is a tangible artifact of our work to building a safe place for our immigrant families here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. So, Dr. Reid, earlier you talked about the trauma of the pandemic and that we still need to wrestle with much of that trauma. So, how will you maintain balance in our schools between supporting the emotional needs of students and enforcing better behavior, such as not having drugs in school respecting people and property, attendance policies, et cetera?
So I don't know, for those of you who are obviously parents, caregivers, or staff, I think that the 2 years-ish of our pandemic has really, in many ways, created some challenges for our young people, and honestly, even one another, in interacting with one another again in person. And I think I remember getting a phone call the first week of school from one of our middle school principals, Matthew. And Matthew called and he said, "Dr. Reid, I have 8th graders running to lunch." 8th graders never run to lunch, right? That's what they do generally in 6th grade, is they run to lunch. So there's this bit of a gap as students come back and they re-socialize, they relearn sort of how to connect with one another. And it's important that we think about intentionally talking about that. I find that with behavior, it's so important to teach what we expect rather than punish our way out of behavior challenges. So I think as we set our expectations clear and we teach into those and remind one another, it's our responsibility and our opportunity and joy to support one another in showing up as our best selves. And I know our students are frustrated. They're building their stamina back up, our younger students, being in school again physically all day. I recently met with a group of elementary students, and I said, is there something from the pandemic we would like to bring with us, right? Are there some things we learned that we would really like to continue? Their number one thing was they liked eating all day. I know, they love the opportunity to just snack. So I know that seems like a small thing, but as I think about it, right, the opportunity to grab a snack at any time when they were at home was something that at least the elementary students at the school really thought was helpful for them. I think the other thing we have to remember is that students, in some cases, were on their own, right? And the skills and the independence and the flexibility and the initiative they had coming back to a very controlled environment, honestly, is taking some getting used to. So I think as we extend grace to one another, teach into expectations we have, are clear with what we expect, and partner with parents and caregivers, we'll get our students through this.
Okay, great. We have a question from Erica from Annandale High School.
Hello, my name is Erica Lee from Annandale High School, and I'm a sophomore here. My question is, well, you seemed like a person who is very interested in the performing arts community. So I wanted to ask, what are you planning to do in support of students in the performing arts community in terms of better materials, opportunities, and instruments? So I'll say this in Korean now, but.
Thank you, Erica.
Oh, she's going to say it in Korean now.
Okay.
저는 Dr. Reid 교육감님께서 공원 예술에 매우 관심이 있는 분으로 봅니다. 그래서 제 질문은 공연 예술 학생 단체 지원을 위해 더 나은 악기, 다양한 기회와 자료 측면에서 어떤 계획을 갖고 있는지 질문하고 싶습니다.
Thank you, Erica. I think our fine and performing arts programs are core. I don't consider them extracurricular as many I think divisions do. I think it is central to who we are. And I think it's important that all students have an opportunity to experience the fine and performing arts. Our support of that, what I'd have to say, Erica, is I have to look at the budget and look at what we currently are doing and what is possible to do. In other words, where are the gaps from your perspective, from your conductors and directors' perspective? And I will have to get back to you on that one.
All right, because when I came into like the performing arts community, specifically in orchestra, I saw that a lot of the instruments were very old and needed repair, and also the technology wasn't really that great. So I just wanted to ask that.
I think it's an important question. You can't play an instrument an orchestra instrument without strings, right?
Yeah.
Or the bow is really frayed. So I will look into that. So excellent question.
All right, thank you, Erica.
I will also say, Erica, that our commitment to instrumental music, where I came from, we've doubled the size of our elementary instrumental music in the last several years. We stopped offering it just outside the school day, where you had to have special transportation in the morning to get there. We moved it into the school day, and we stopped charging the $250 fee for participating. We used to say, well, the fee is there, but if you need help with that, you can connect with somebody. But people, we recognized, they don't ask, and many of our students didn't want to ask their parents to get assistance. So what we've done is we've just said there are no fees. It's in the school day. It doesn't require a special transportation model. We removed those barriers, and the interest doubled within 2 years. So we're really excited, and we partner with the Community Foundation for instruments, so that any student that needs an instrument has one. So I just think it's really important. So I look forward to the continued conversation. Yep.
Okay, great. So the next question, Dr. Reid, what are your thoughts on how we best meet the needs of special education students, including twice exceptional students in Fairfax County Public Schools?
So I think that, again, our students that have special needs have individual IEPs or individual teams that determine what is uniquely best in an individual setting. I think our twice exceptional students, many of them at times have struggled, I think, in higher academic courses without the proper supports. And I think it's very important to consider what are those proper supports for our twice exceptional students to be in courses that they have a right to be in, a desire to be in, and can excel in with the proper support. And as I think about students in special education, that's most important. Do we have the right supports in place for each student to have their needs met so that they're able to learn and have the same mountaintop educational experience that each and every student in the division has? I think that one of the things that's important in looking at special education programs is the amount of time they spend in what we call our least restrictive environment versus in general education classrooms. And I haven't yet looked at the data for Fairfax County, but we do know from research that often typically developing peers are very positive classmates for our young children who may have special needs. So I would want to look at those topics, support the IEP process, and make sure that our students have the supports they need when they're in general education courses, be they advanced, the arts, career and technical education, and so forth. It's very important.
Okay. So, thank you.
Okay.
So I do want to shift gears a bit to technology here. So will there be options in the future for media-free classrooms for those students who really struggle with the enticing distractions of personal laptops?
I don't know about you, but when we came back to school, I was not interested in doing a lot of work on a laptop for a while. I think it had lost some of its charm a bit. Having said that, I think technology is a tool. Just like many other tools we use, it can be utilized effectively to support student learning, and it, of course, can also be something that can be overused. I happen to be personally a fan of very different modalities at times of education. One of the data points I've been sharing with our students and our staff is that 65% of our students in kindergarten through 12th grade right now in our schools across the country are preparing for a career that does not exist today. 6 out of 10 of every student sitting in our classrooms today are preparing for a career that does not yet exist. And I think when we think about that, The ideas around collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, thinking creatively become very important if we're going to graduate Fairfax County students to enter this world that we have yet to imagine. And we need to make sure they have the tools within themselves, that confidence to be successful and be leaders in that space. I love the idea of developing, in fact, in North Shore, I'm going to be stepping away from planning for some outdoor school possibilities where the entire school programming is simply outdoors. And so I think there are a variety of ways we can think about school. We learned in the pandemic that some of our most amazing learning did not need to happen in a classroom. There are learning spaces, externships, apprenticeships, paid internships, opportunities to be out in the field, in nature, downlinking NOAA or NASA video and scrutinizing it. There are just so many possibilities that are a little less traditional and perhaps will really well prepare our young people for this world when they graduate. So I'm excited to explore those possibilities with you as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Reid. Before we go on to the next question, I just want to remind folks in the audience that if you have questions, please submit those questions. We have students with note cards and pens so that you can write those questions down, get those to us, and we'll get those posted on the monitor here so that we can get those questions to Dr. Reid. And so our next question is from Amelia, a student at Cherry Run Elementary School.
Hi, Dr. Reid. My question to you is, would you consider putting in full kitchens in our schools so we can have handmade lunches instead of preheated ones?
Say again?
Would you put in real kitchens in our cafeteria, in our schools so we could, instead of preheated ones?
Okay. Real kitchens?
Yeah.
One of the things that I would say about that, and probably it's one thing I didn't share in my interview. It's one of the. Are any of you? Do you follow a lot of the lunch wars conversation around scratch cooking for school lunches? Anybody? Yeah. So we did work a few districts ago that resulted in us doing a farm to table program. As well as utilizing one of our criteria for our RFP with Aramark or Sodexo, was that we had at least one everyday scratch cooking alternative for our student lunches. And I really believe that nutrition, so I'm in that book is what I'm saying, quoted on the importance of healthy food for our students. Other than sleep, right? Enough sleep, healthy food, and exercise are really important and often, I think, underestimated as drivers for student learning and achievement. I also heard today that it's important not only to have healthy food, so I love the idea of real kitchens. I'll have to add that to my data point in my 100-day visits. See, this is why the plan's not done. I've got to pay attention because this is important. I also heard from the students they want halal and kosher options at lunch. And so I think, if we're going to meet student needs, it's not just in the classroom, it's that full experience. So I appreciate the question, and I'll work on the real kitchens.
All right, thanks, Amelia. So commercials actually do work. I asked for questions, and we have a new question that was just submitted. So Dr. Reid, what programs have you worked with to support increased access to college for traditionally underrepresented students?
So, I think one of the programs, honestly, the best solution is not a program, right? It's individuals with a mindset that believe in each and every student to make sure that they know that we believe that that's a future they can have. So that's number one. It's not a program, it's a belief system. So that mindset is critical, and it's one that I have and I know our staff have on for sure. If you're looking at a program, I know the AVID program, I don't know if that's in Fairfax County, but that's a study skills, strong program. We've seen nationally there's a great deal of data to support that effort. And I think, so that's certainly a program. I also would say that we have to partner with higher education. And I'll give you an example, since the question asked for an example too. We are close to the University of Washington in my current district. So representatives from Dr. Habib Rabar, actually, who is head of the radiology department for the medical school at the University of Washington Medical School, visited our student board and said he wanted to make available a pathway for our traditionally underrepresented students to consider medical school. So we created a weekend experience for students that we put out through our student board and our affinity student groups. And we're able to send students to a weekend experience at the University of Washington Medical School with special passes and so forth in the radiology department. And now they're eligible for 6-week paid internships this summer. So we feel like it's not just talking about it, but creating those partnerships and pathways so students can actually participate in it. And I'm hearing the results of that actually this Thursday. Today's Tuesday, right? So this Thursday, one of our student ambassadors, Osai, is going to be sharing how excited she is about that with the board, student board. So you have to develop those partnerships as well. So those are some experiences. I could share more, but.
Okay, great, thank you. This next question, it's perhaps an employee question, but not necessarily. What is your stance on fairness and equity in the workplace?
I mean, I think this is my stance on it. I think it's obviously a good thing. I think it's critical, and it's something, again, not just statutorily, but as a mindset. I think it's important that we respect and support fairness and equity in the workplace. And I will honestly tell you, we have a worker shortage right now. Our teachers, our educators, our drivers, our food service staff, principals, there is a very real shortage of folks in terms of workers right now. And people vote with their feet. If staff do not feel respected or feel like it's fair or equitable at the workplace, they will vote with their feet and they will leave and exacerbate our shortages. So I think it's not just the core value about what the right thing to do is, it's about what would help with that. I suppose also, as Fairfax County is a one-to-one computer device system, the amount of paper we print, if we can look at that as well in terms of what we are doing online that we don't need to print. So just sort of all of our practices, both individually and then collectively. And I'd love to hear what has already been started with that topic here.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that was just submitted. What, in your opinion, is the primary purpose of the public school? Is it to help students achieve to the best of their ability the academic skills that they will need in life, or is there another purpose? And then how will your leadership reflect the vision for the role of public education within the Fairfax County community?
So I'm not sure that there's, so I think it's in my opinion. So I think the primary purpose, obviously, of public education is to educate. And I think of it often as jazz music, right? The rule provides for improvisation. And there is a rule. There are certain things that all of our students must learn, right? There is a rule. And once we master that rule, then there's improvisation. What do we choose to do with the knowledge we are able to master? And I think in terms of my leadership, what I want to think about is once we establish the rule, which is a floor and not a ceiling, and too often we think of things as a ceiling, but if we think about that as a floor, then what can our students demonstrate independently after they've had the opportunity to acquire the knowledge we're providing? Because understanding something is different than acquiring knowledge. We can acquire knowledge, our students, we can provide knowledge, but it's their ability to independently apply that knowledge in a new situation that will demonstrate whether they understand what they are learning. And I think sometimes we miss that link. It's not simply about receiving knowledge and then putting it back on a test. If I can't independently apply that in a new situation, then I'm not sure I have completely learned that. And let me share with you what I mean by that. When I was a high school principal, I was visiting with our 9th grade science teachers because we had a number of students who were not progressing well academically in our 9th grade science class at that time. And so I went into the class and I looked at the students and we said, well, show me some work from our A students and then our students who are not progressing, who are not passing. And I looked at these notebooks. How many of you have seen science notebooks of, high schoolers, middle schoolers? So the A student, of course, had the perfect notebook. Everything was, on time, turned in, really well done, honestly. And I'm familiar with lab books, so it was very well done. And the student who was really struggling, it was hard to follow the notes. And they had been absent one day, and then the notes weren't there, and then there were missing pieces. The next day, after we looked at the paperwork, I said, I want to come in to watch the lab demonstration, the laboratory. And the demonstration lab in that 9th grade science class was taking the wires and the battery and hooking them up to a bulb to make it light. And who do you think was able to make that happen? The student getting the A or the student who was not passing the class? It was the student not passing the class. He went up there, he was able to wire it, explain it, get the bulb to light. The student who had the perfect notebook could not get the bulb to light. Because what they didn't understand was the mechanics of how the wires and the circuit ran to light the bulb. So I say that to say, for me, it's very important that we think about how we ask students to demonstrate their understanding of the knowledge we are teaching. Because both is really what we want, right? We want a notebook that tracks what is good about the lesson and what we understand. But if we can't light the bulb at the end of the day, then we haven't really learned the lesson. So I think for me, the purpose of school is not just the knowledge and the GPA and the grades and so forth, which are important. It's also what can our students do with that knowledge and how do they demonstrate that? I think that's very important.
So Dr. Reid, earlier we asked a question about post-pandemic learning loss. And so we're going to shift gears a little bit, same topic, but what are your goals for FCPS post-pandemic to close achievement gaps?
So I think it's really, it's the same topic. How we use time, how we use staff, and how we use resources are very important. I am very excited about the new literacy curriculum that is coming forward for Fairfax County Public Schools. I think the science of reading approach and its impact on our students who have dyslexia early and our ability to identify those students is very important. If we don't understand the underlying cause for the learning challenges, it's difficult to address them effectively. And as I mentioned earlier, those are unique student to student. But how we use time, there are some students who may need more time to do the work. That doesn't mean we lower the expectation, but we do provide more time and more support. How do we use our summer time? And how do we use the resources we have, making sure the curriculum that we believe has the highest impact is the curriculum we're using, and with the support. So our staff has the training and the time to implement that. So I'm looking forward to looking at the data around these gaps and making sure that we have a plan to address those directly. Our students also raised that issue earlier today, so it's an important topic.
Okay, we're going to sit in the pandemic for a little bit longer.
Okay.
We have a question about what is your plan for making up learning loss shortcomings as a result of virtual classes?
Sounds like the same question. Different. Yeah, I think it's the same question, right? And it's how we use, again, the time, our materials, and our staffing. There are, and also our learning spaces. One of the things I have a wonder about is how effectively any school division in the country is using one-to-one computing devices as a strategy. And just wondering also how different learning spaces can support accelerating learning to make up for these learning losses. Because I think I've seen in some cases some significant gains when a little more time and attention that's focused on particularly the reading, writing, and mathematics as those core content areas. And as I mentioned earlier, also providing some type of summer academy time will be important. I'm assuming staff here already have a plan as well in place to work on that. So those will be things I'll be looking at in those first 100 days and look forward to kind of asking some thoughtful questions about what we've been doing and what we hope to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Another question, do you have a plan or a course of action to protect, affirm, and stand up for trans and LGBTQ students and staff, especially given the 200+ bills and laws from across the U.S. that directly impact queer and trans people in negative and harmful ways?
So again, I think this is, I don't know that it's a plan. Again, it's a mindset, and it's very important to me that each and every student in this division is seen, heard, and affirmed, and feels like they can show up as their authentic self when they are in the learning spaces and classrooms. It takes a lot of energy to try to be somebody else when you're in class and then also learn. So I have a core value around that each and every student is going to be seen, heard, and affirmed, and there's not a plan necessary for that. That's simply how we're going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I think this is another question about STEM subjects, and we talked earlier about that balance, but those STEM subjects are rapidly gaining popularity, and occasionally other subjects like arts and humanities are left behind. Do you think it is important to make our education more balanced and ensure that all subjects have equal recognition?
Yes. I do think STEM subjects, you know, where my district is, we're in the backyard of Microsoft, right? The headquarters, Amazon, SpaceX, Amgen, and so forth. So obviously coding, research, science, we're right in the nexus of that, just as you are in Fairfax County. And so I think when many parents are in STEM-related fields, many students obviously have interest in those fields. The topic of coding, creating apps, writing language, AI, all of those topics, I think, are obviously very popular because many of our families are employed in those career sectors. Having said that, I also have met with students who have said, you know, Dr. Reid, my parents really want me to do fill in the blank. They believe that computer science is what I need to major in. Here are the number of open slots at X university. My parents really think this is what I need to do. And I guess I'm talking to you as parents. I'm a parent of 4 children myself. And I've said, well, why, you know, is that a passion for you? And it's not a no, but it's not a, right? It's like this. And so I said, one of the things I would ask you to think about is how do you take your passion, right, and your responsibility to thinking about your future life, and how do you marry those in a way that you're going to bound out of bed to work for the next 40 years to go to that job, right? Because it's so important to be convicted about work that is going to happen for many, many years. So I think the STEM careers, we have to also be careful because I think sometimes our students have ideas that don't fit in that box. And one of the things I guess recently I shared with our principals in my other system is that we're often asked to think outside the box, right? And we are so busy right now creating new boxes to put our ideas and our people, our friends, our neighbors in, that we're not allowing ourselves the freedom to think about what could it be with no box, right? Instead of creating new boxes so quickly, what if we just removed the boxes and thought about what are those careers? How do I prepare for them? What is my passion? How do I lead my life and not someone else's? Those are questions our young people are wrestling with right now. And I know we support them in that. And I know that sort of wanders from the STEM question, but I do wonder sometimes. I think it's important to make sure we listen to our young people too about what their passion is and where they'd like to go with it.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, it's about students with disabilities. And so often, our students with disabilities are forgotten on panels, councils, etc. How do you intend to hear these students' voices and include their concerns in your changes?
So we include our students with disabilities as an affinity group and their voices at the table for decisions, councils, and in major decisions that are made in a school division of this size, you might guess that students are not in the room at that time, right? But we want to make sure their voice is in the room. So we would want to make sure we include students with all life lived experiences as part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from a parent in the audience. As a parent and substitute teacher, I am concerned about the toll the pandemic has taken on our wonderful teachers and staff. How can we empower more support for them?
Whoever that person is, I want to thank all those parents out there that have, number one, the opportunity and time, and number two, who have stepped up to help be substitute teachers. There are so many of you I know out there across the country, and I know during the Omicron surge and honestly the current pandemic numbers, it's been so important to have our community step up and say, we would like to come in and help substitute and be part of that work if we can. I know many community members are working and are not able to, but those who have been able to, we really appreciate that. Honestly, I think what I hear from staff is just a simple thank you goes a long way. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, but just a thank you and a respect for just how hard they've been working. Our staff have never worked harder, and it's never been more visible. I think shifting learning modalities, trauma at times within their own lives and families, the struggle with their own children, and just, I think it's, I'm just so glad someone put that out there. I think our staff could really use a little thank you and appreciation at this time. So however that works, yeah.
So we have a question about our military-connected students. How do you plan to support military-connected students and ensure that they are supported academically and socially?
This is really important, right? Like a lot of these questions are like really critically important to that experience and culture and climate we create for our students. I think as a military child myself, I remember moving frequently and that need to build community quickly and how important that was. And when you were going to a particular base, if you were on base, everybody was moving, so you had a shared experience. But when you moved somewhere off base, that wasn't always the case because you had students that had been there perhaps since they started school, and you were always the new student. So I think it's important that we understand how to welcome and onboard new students as they come in, be it the military or other moves that families need to make. So making sure we are welcoming to all our families. I think in particular, our military families make such a sacrifice, and thank you to those who serve, who are with us this evening. It's important. I think the traditions and what we owe our military, the debt is enormous, one we can't pay, of course. But I think I was at, what was the name of the elementary school? Started with an S.
Saratoga. Oh, Sangster.
Sangster, right, Sangster. And I met a fifth grader, who said they had just moved here from North Carolina. He was a military family student. I said, well, this is, I think, the best data, right? How do you feel? Do you feel connected? Did it work? Are there things and he said, got it, we've got it, right? I've done this move a few times in fifth grade, right? He was very articulate. And he said, I asked, is there anything that we could improve on how we welcome you as a student who has moved significantly as a military student? He said, nope, we got it. So now that's one data point. one data point. That's not a pattern yet, but I think we have to ask our kids, do you feel like you're comfortable here? Were you welcomed well? Were you onboarded in a thoughtful way? Our kids will tell us, and I think that's the voice we need to hear. We also need to make sure that I was in a district that had a great deal more military a few districts ago, and one of the things we heard from military families was that some of our deadlines and timelines for registration were in conflict. They were in conflict with people's orders, right? So that we would have families transitioning in after, say, a deadline to get into a program or to make application and so forth. So we created an online process and worked with a liaison on the base. At that point, it's a nuclear submarine base at Bangor, and the Kitsap, the nuclear sub folks. So we created an online module with most bases, and I assume those here do as well, have a liaison, an education liaison, so that families receiving orders to our region would have an opportunity to get a special course catalog and so forth and those dates ahead of time so that their students wouldn't miss out. We were also identified in that case as a region for students with special programs and needs. And the military has certain regions that are designated, and we were one of those. So we wanted to make sure those transitions were smooth for families, especially families with children with special needs, because we may need to gear up a program or make sure that we're there to welcome them warmly when they arrived. So there are things you can do behind the scenes, and then of course we want to hear from our students. Are we hitting the target so that they feel not just welcome, but that they feel like they belong?
So I'm hoping that this next question, they accidentally had the all caps on in the back because I feel like they're yelling at me right now. It came up and I went, whoa. So how do you plan to address bullying so our students feel safe? And maybe they wanted to emphasize that.
Maybe. Do you think?
Could be.
So I would say that bullying, harassment, intimidation are clearly behaviors that are not acceptable. In our state of Washington, a number of years ago, our former governor, Chris Gregoire, asked me and asked 3 other people, the 4 of us, to write our state bullying legislation. So I was one of the authors for our state law on bullying and harassment, and was with the state legal counsel and attorney general's office, the person who provided training for our administrators across the state. So this is a topic very important to me. It's a topic that's more often than not connected to school violence and active shooters in schools. Bullying has been some piece of that very often. I would say also one of the concerns I have, and what led our governor to wanting to have legislation early on, is bullying is one the American Pediatric Association considers as a public health concern because the amount of school days students miss as a result of their response to bullying. They don't feel well, and so on and so forth. So it's a public health issue, and that's how we framed it as we wrote the legislation. I would also say the biggest concern for us is that it's a behavior that is the #1 behavior that's a carryover from adolescence to adulthood. If we don't disrupt that behavior, also on the part of the bully, we potentially are complicit in the development of an adult who engages in bullying behavior. So it's really critical that we address this topic straight on, have really clear expectations, teach the behavior we expect, and consequent the behavior we want to extinguish. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So our students have been on stage, and the teleprompter is great. They're telling me things through the teleprompter.
It says really last question.
We've had the last question for the last few questions, and this time it's really the last question.
Do you believe it?
I don't believe it.
What do we want to over/under on? Is it really the last question?
It's really the last question. And before we get to that last question, I do just want to thank you, Dr. Reid, for your time with us these past few days. I've seen you in many different situations with many different people over 2 days. families, and your strength, your courage is unwavering for students. And so we appreciate not only you being here tonight with this august group, but we appreciate the time that you spent with everyone these past 2 days so that we can get to know who you are just a bit better. And I think that, at least for me, in these past 2 days, I've seen that, and I'm hopeful that for those in the audience tonight, they were able to see that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And so the last question, if you could write a book about the future of teaching and learning, what would be the most important element of your book?
I think the most important element of the book would be, I would hope I'd be writing a book that would illuminate the possibility of a just educational system. I think that we must be a just system where each and every student feels seen, heard, affirmed, and has an educational experience that gives them the confidence, the capacity, the creativity, the ability to exercise their hopes and dreams in whatever choice they make when they leave us. And we have yet to do that in this country. And I believe that Fairfax County Public Schools is positioned to become that first exemplar of a truly just educational system. It's the right time. This is the right place. We are the right people, and we have to do this as a legacy to our young people. That's what I think I would write about.
Thank you. So again, thank you, Dr. Reid, for all that you've shared with us tonight. I want to thank our students on the stage one last time.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I want to thank you, the
Thank you.
parents,
Yeah.
our staff who
Thanks. Way
came
to go,
out this
Adams.
evening for joining us
Thanks. I
and
look forward
sharing
to
your
hearing you guys
thoughts,
play.
sharing your questions. If we didn't get to your question tonight, this is only the first of many engagement opportunities that Dr. Reid will be partaking in. And so if we didn't get to it tonight, we do have a virtual town hall on Tuesday, May 17th. I know that Dr. Reid will be ready for engagement at that time. I don't want to talk about questions and answers. I want to talk about engagement, because we can answer questions all day. But until we actually engage and get into the work with you, it's just a back and forth. So we have other opportunities, and we'll have many more opportunities for that engagement. So thank you. Please stay connected with FCPS This Week newsletter. And good night and drive safely.
Thank you.